Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Continuing to take a look at the next week's slate, heading out to the Big Ten as Minnesota heads on the road to play the Iowa Hawkeyes. This is a game that not a lot of people, it's not going to be a lot of people's cup of tea in terms of what they want in a football game. If you're a Big Ten fan like myself, you're fired up for this one. These are two teams that want to run the football, play good defense. This is going to be a really fun one. Excited to get into it. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys, and especially the Big Ten fans. Y'all know it's my conference. I love talking Big Ten football. The amount of support y'all have shown, it truly does mean a lot. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, let me know in the comment section who you guys are rocking with picks, predictions, keys to the game. Without further ado, let's get into this one. And I want to start with what we've seen from Iowa on the offensive side of the ball, and quite frankly, how they match up with Minnesota. Iowa on offense, it's not been pretty from a statistical category, right? 20.9 points per game, that's 104th in the country. Only 4.2 yards per play, that's 126th. That being said, you look at the last 2 weeks, the running game is getting going. And when you look at this Iowa team and what they want to do, the rushing attack is such an important aspect to this offense. LaShawn Williams, Caleb Johnson, really starting to ramp it up. And if Iowa can continue the success running the football, like that's kind of the key for the Iowa Hawkeyes to win the Big Ten West. Now, getting to the passing attack, it looks grim, and it looks even more grim with Eric All out, right? You have Luke Lachey, he goes down with the season ender. Eric All steps up, he goes down with the season ender. Deacon Hill only completing 38% of his balls. Like it's not been great getting things going through the air. But if Iowa can continue the success they've had running the football, like stuff will open up in the passing attack. And this is never going to be a prolific passing attack. We knew even when they brought Cade McNamara in, it was never going to be a passing attack that's putting up 400 passing yards per game. But if they can just develop a semblance of it, work and play action, hitting a few explosive plays through the air, Deacon Hill, one thing he can do is push the ball down the field. That's kind of the key to this Iowa offense, but it does start with the run game, and that's what you've been seeing work for the Iowa Hawkeyes the last couple of weeks. And if you're an Iowa fan looking at that Big Ten West, having a huge win on the road against Wisconsin, like you're looking and you're excited about what this team can be in terms of playing for a Big Ten championship at the end of the year. This Iowa resume, a lot of people complaining about Iowa being in the top 25. They can't play offense. I get their concerns, but you look at Iowa in their resume, their only losses on the road at Penn State, which I think is a legitimate top 5 team in the country. You take a look at some of these wins on the road at Iowa State is suddenly looking like a very impressive win. They're making some moves in the Big 12. On the road at Wisconsin, another impressive win. This Iowa team is good, and it's not always pretty. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but this is a team that's winning football games and should be ranked in the top 25. Now, how do they match up against Minnesota's defense? Minnesota has struggled to stop the run, and that's probably what you're most optimistic about. 26.7 points per game, 6 yards per play. That's number 96 in the country. This is not the Minnesota defense that we've seen extremely stingy like the last couple of years, specifically against the run, giving up 4.5 yards per carry. That's 89th in the country. Iowa, the key to this game is getting that run game going, and if they can do that against a Minnesota team that is kind of a confusing team, especially on defense, gave up over 400 passing yards to Northwestern. Nebraska ran for 180 yards on them. That's probably the key to Iowa's game here is getting that rushing attack going. Now, flipping the sides, taking a look at this Minnesota offense and how it matches up against Iowa's defense, Minnesota fans, I think, would probably agree with me that this is a team that's lost a lot of NFL talent the last couple of years, right? You lose your bell cow running back in Mo Ibrahim. You lose 3 guys on the inside of that offensive line. John Michael Schmitz, one of the best centers that we saw in college football last year. The rushing attack hasn't quite been there. And it's no secret, Minnesota wants to run the football. That's the identity of this team, running it 62% of the time, 7th in the country. Minnesota pretty much runs the ball the most in the country outside of the service academies. They just haven't been doing it at that high of a level. If they get Darius Taylor back, if you're a Minnesota fan, you feel decent about it. But in terms of the rushing attack, I think losing some of those guys on the offensive line, losing a guy like Mo Ibrahim, it's kind of hurt what Minnesota's wanted to do in terms of the identity of this offense. I thought we'd see a little bit more of Ethan McManus. They call him the Greek rifle for a reason. They don't throw the ball much, and they don't really give him an opportunity. I get he hasn't been great, but I like some of the weapons they have. Daniel Jackson, Brevin Spanford. I like to see PJ Fleck say, hey, we still want to run the football. Don't get me wrong, but we don't have that kind of offensive line like we've had in years past. But I think McManus is more talented than Tanner Morgan. From what I'm looking at, I want to see McManus kind of rip that ball around. He has a huge arm. He's a pretty accurate passer. Put a little bit more on his shoulders because this Minnesota rushing attack, just quite frankly, hasn't been great. Now, looking at this Iowa defense, there's nothing new here. Like, it's still one of the best defenses in the country, 14.9 points per game, number 8 in the country. You look at Iowa's defense and you take out that Penn State game, this is still one of the best defenses that you see in the country, specifically in the back end. Now, I was just talking about McManus throwing the football. It's going to be really tough sledding against this Iowa secondary. You take a look at the numbers, a 58% completion percentage. That's top 25 in the country. Here's the kicker, though. 4.9 yards per pass attempt. That's number 2 in the country. This Iowa team does not give up the explosive play through the air, and they come up and tackle, right? So they're going to let you have some completions. They're only going to be for 3 yards because guys like Cooper DeJean, Sebastian Castro, they're coming up and tackling in space. They don't let anything get behind them. That's been the key to this Iowa offense for the last couple of years. We're not going to give up the explosive play, and when you make a mistake, we're going to capitalize on it, and force the turnover. Sebastian Castro and Cooper DeJean, name me a better cornerback duo than how those two are playing right now. I don't think you really can. Looking at the front seven, it's been pretty solid against the run. Only 3.6 yards per carry. Top 35 in the country. Nick Jackson, Jay Higgins, both playing really, really well at that linebacker position. This is the recipe for Iowa. It's always has been the recipe, and it's not always pretty. And as fans, it gets frustrating at times. But this is a team that wants to run the football on offense. It's not going to put up crazy numbers and play really, really good defense. And more importantly, opportunistic defense. And when that team makes a mistake, you're going to get a safety. You're going to get a pick six. You're going to get a turnover that causes the Iowa offense to get a short field. Getting to the pick here, a lot of people are on Minnesota. This line has moved a little bit, sitting at Iowa, 4-point favorites at home. And I'm going to ride that one. I like it a lot more inside of a field goal. And I get people's narrative of taking Iowa to cover outside of a field goal. You don't feel good about that. I look at this Minnesota team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I don't really trust it, and I definitely don't trust it against an Iowa team that forces turnovers. McManus has thrown 6 interceptions on the year. You're not feeling necessarily great about the turnover battle, and I think Iowa is starting to get it going on the ground, and that's an aspect where Minnesota's been struggling on defense. So in terms of those matchups, I get Iowa. It's not an offense that you want to pick covering outside of a field goal, but I think they can win this game at home against a quarterback that's been turning the ball over. Give me the Iowa Hawkeyes to cover the 4 points. This is going to be a good one. I'm excited for it. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all